It all started on a mundane Monday, the kind of day where everything feels off. Gloomy skies, socks clinging to the floor, and your lunch spilling in your bag. My only goal that day was simple: buy laundry detergent and avoid burning dinner for once. But life, as it often does, had other plans. I was standing in the checkout line at Randall's, clutching the cheapest detergent I could find, scrolling through emails when her message popped up like a punch to the gut. "We're just having dinner with him, don't worry." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up, just those infuriating words and an even more infuriating smiley face. Her name is Lana. We've been married for 12 years. She used to call me her cozy place. Now she calls me too predictable. My name is Marshall. I'm 41, underpaid, over-loyal, and apparently excellent at ignoring glaring red flags, like her sudden wardrobe upgrades for errands or her habit of locking her phone after every software update. But this was different. Dinner with him. Who the hell was him? I froze in the checkout line while some teenager behind me sighed impatiently because I wasn't moving fast enough. I paid for the detergent but left the store without it. My mind was unraveling like a loose thread on a cheap sweater. I got into my car and stared at my phone, not at the message itself, but at the pattern forming around it. How many late meetings had there been lately? How many weekends did she claim she needed space, retreating to her sister's cabin? Then something chilling came back to me. Just 2 nights ago, she laughed in her sleep and murmured, "No, don't. He might hear us." At the time, I thought it was part of a dream. Now it felt like a replay of reality. Still, I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove, not home, but to the Overlook where we used to sit together years ago, drinking cheap gas station wine and dreaming up baby names we never used. I parked in the same spot she always told me not to. I stared out at the skyline, my fingers numb, wondering how long she'd been slipping away from me while I stayed busy reheating leftovers and asking about her day. Then I texted her back. "Divorce papers are already filed. What's there to worry about?" I hadn't filed anything, but I wanted to see how she'd react. And oh, she reacted. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared again before vanishing altogether. 30 minutes later, she called. I let it ring. Eventually, she sent another text. "Marshall, what are you talking about? This is just Denny from my department. We're all here. What are you even saying?" Right, Denny. The same guy who texted her last week, "See you tonight." The same guy whose name she'd saved as Danielle in her contacts to throw me off. But the worst part? While she claimed, "We're all here," her location tag betrayed her. She was sitting at a cozy Italian restaurant at a table for 2. 1 man, 1 woman, bathed in soft lighting. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even turn off the car. I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap, staring at the small blue dot on the map that confirmed my suspicions. She wasn't just having dinner. She was somewhere I hadn't been invited, with someone she hadn't mentioned, doing something she didn't want me to see. So I drove there. It wasn't fueled by anger or accompanied by dramatic music like some cinematic breakup scene. I drove as if I were running an errand, returning something I never intended to buy: my trust. The restaurant was too upscale for a casual meal. I'd never even stepped foot inside. She always claimed it was too expensive for us, that we needed to save. Yet there she was, laughing over wine with a man I didn't recognize. They weren't sitting across from each other, but side by side in the booth. Her body leaned toward him, her head tilted in a way that once seemed charming when directed at me during my awkward jokes. He reached out and touched her wrist, not accidentally, not jokingly. It was deliberate, familiar, as though he'd done it countless times before. I don't remember getting out of the car or crossing the parking lot, but I vividly recall standing near the entrance, frozen by the sight of my wedding ring dangling from a thin chain around her neck. She had never worn it like that, not once in 12 years. I chose that ring, and now it hung like a trophy around her neck, displayed for a man who clearly wasn't her husband. That's when she looked up. Our eyes met briefly through the window. Her smile faltered. She said something quickly to him. He didn't glance back. Then she grabbed her phone. I knew what would come next. Sure enough, my phone buzzed. "Marshall, please don't do this." But I already had. I didn't storm in, scream, or demand answers. I simply stood there, watching the woman I promised to grow old with gaze at another man as if he were the only one who mattered. And the worst part? I think she expected me to leave, to go home and pretend I hadn't seen anything, just like always. Another text arrived. "Please go home. I'll explain everything. You're overreacting." Overreacting? That word stung more than the betrayal itself. Catching your wife sharing an intimate dinner with another man, lying to your face, hiding her ring, and dismissing your feelings through a message somehow wasn't enough to justify a reaction? I stayed far enough away not to draw their attention again. I watched them eat, talk, laugh. At one point, she leaned over and wiped something off his lip with her napkin. That's when it hit me, the realization that twisted my stomach into knots. This wasn't new. The ease between them, the comfort, the intimacy, it wasn't spontaneous. It was practiced, rehearsed, familiar. He understood her subtle cues. She knew how he liked his steak. When he cracked a joke, her laughter wasn't polite. It was genuine. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about all the nights leading up to it. The ones where she told me money was tight, where she made excuses not to visit places like this. It was about every lie wrapped in a smile, every moment stolen behind closed doors while I remained oblivious. And as I stood there, invisible and insignificant, I realized the depth of what I'd lost. Not just her, but the life we built together. A fragile construct of trust and promises shattered without warning. I thought about walking away, letting her believe I'd gone home, pretending I hadn't seen any of it. But deep down, I knew I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed. The truth was laid bare, undeniable and painful. All I could do was stand there, watching the fragments of my marriage crumble further with each passing second. She laughed the way someone does when they've heard a joke before but still find it charming. For a moment, I thought about walking in with my phone camera rolling, capturing everything. Or maybe shouting her name and making a scene, forcing her mask to slip. But that's not who I am. Anger doesn't come naturally to me. My pain sinks inward instead of exploding outward. So I settled for taking one picture. Just a single photo through the glass. Her smiling at him, his hand resting on hers, the ring dangling from her neck catching the light. Then I went home. And here's the part that really gets to me. 2 hours later, she walked through the door as if nothing had happened. She tossed her purse onto the table, kicked off her heels, and called out, "Hey babe, you up?" That word, babe, used to make me feel lucky. Now it felt like salt in an open wound. I sat on the couch, holding my phone with the photo pulled up. She froze in the hallway when she saw it. "Marshall," she whispered, "it's not what you think." That was the moment I finally said something I'd rehearsed countless times in my head, but never believed I'd actually say aloud. "No, Lana, it's exactly what I think." She stood there, hunched over like a child caught red-handed. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for some angle to salvage the situation. She didn't rush toward me. She didn't cry. She just stood there, calculating. I didn't say another word. I kept staring at the photo on my screen, letting the silence stretch until it hummed in my ears. "I know what it looks like," she finally said. That phrase, the classic excuse that always means exactly what it seems. "His name is Darren," she continued, unprompted. "He's a friend, just a friend. I knew you'd take it the wrong way." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughter felt like the only thing keeping me from screaming. "You mean the Darren? The one whose hand was on yours for 2 straight hours? That Darren?" She flinched, but only for a second. Then she crossed her arms defensively, as though I was the one being unreasonable. "You've been distant for months, Marshall. You barely notice me anymore."
Everything is always about your stress, your work, your sleep schedule. So your solution, I shot back, was to hold hands with Darren in a restaurant you told me we couldn't afford? That shut her up, briefly. Then came the line I'll never forget, not because it was dramatic, but because it was so painfully dull, so rehearsed, so cowardly. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I stood up slowly. "So how far did you mean for it, Lana?" She didn't answer, and honestly, I didn't push. I didn't want details. I didn't need timelines or excuses or manipulative tears. I'd spent so long carrying blame for things I hadn't done that I almost expected her to turn it around and say it was my fault she cheated. Instead, she just sank onto the edge of the couch like this was any other night and said, "Can we talk like adults?" "Adults?" I repeated, stunned. "Adults don't hide their rings. Adults don't lie about where they are. Adults don't sneak around and then demand calm after blowing everything to pieces." But what struck me most was her demeanor. Bored, not guilty, not scared, just weary. It was as if she'd already moved on, mentally drafting her next line, her next move, her next calculated twist. That's when it hit me. I had never been her partner. I was merely her audience. The silence between us that night wasn't peaceful or reflective. It was the suffocating kind of quiet that makes you acutely aware of just how distant two people can be, even when they're sitting in the same room. She crossed her legs, settling into the posture of someone about to deliver a polished monologue, and said, "Marshall, I think we both know things haven't been working for a while." That sentence, so casual, so cruel, made it sound like we were discussing a malfunctioning appliance, something trivial like an old fridge that no longer kept milk cold. I nodded, mostly to keep myself from doing something humiliating, like breaking down in tears. I've cried more in the last 3 days than I have in the last decade combined, I thought bitterly, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of another drop. "You were always so careful," she remarked, as though it were some fatal flaw. "Careful with money, careful with emotions, careful with plants. And I needed something different, something unpredictable. Something not you." She went on to describe Darren, her new fascination, as if he were some enlightened wanderer who had descended from the mountaintops to rescue her from her mundane suburban existence. He challenged her, she said. He made her laugh in ways I no longer could. He listened without interrupting. He told her to live a little. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply sat there, letting her talk, because it was becoming clear that none of what she said actually mattered. She wasn't explaining to help me understand. She was explaining to absolve herself, to make herself feel better about the wreckage she'd already created. And then came the real blow. "He's going through a divorce too," she announced. "We've been leaning on each other." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I finally saw the pattern.
She wasn't running towards someone brave or exciting. She was running to someone just as broken as she was. Someone else who craved attention, validation, praise, the same hollow cravings that drove her. They weren't building anything new together. They were hiding within each other's chaos, using one another as shields against their own insecurities. With a chilling calmness, she added, "I'm not sure what I want right now, but I don't want to lose everything just because I got confused." I stared at her. "You mean me?" I asked. She nodded. Slowly, I stood up. My legs felt impossibly heavy, as though gravity itself was urging me not to rise. "I think you already lost me, Lana," I said. "You just didn't notice." The next morning, sleep eluded me. Lana was still in the bedroom, pretending the conversation hadn't happened. She brewed coffee, setting out a mug for me with the same mechanical precision she'd practiced for years, as if that single cup of caffeine could undo everything I now knew to be true. I didn't touch it. I went to the garage, not because I wanted to reorganize my tools, but because I needed an excuse to stay out of her way. It was a distraction, something to keep me occupied while pretending it mattered. But what I found wasn't something I'd expected. A shoebox, tucked away behind paint cans and under an old blanket we hadn't touched since our last failed camping trip. My curiosity didn't feel like curiosity at all. It felt more like instinct. Something inside me knew this wasn't just another forgotten item. Inside were printed photos, not digital ones from her phone, but actual physical prints, as if someone had gone through the effort to make these moments permanent. Restaurants, lakesides, even one picture taken in what looked like a hotel mirror. In that photo, his arm was wrapped around her waist, and she was grinning into the reflection, posing, as though imagining some future where they belonged together. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just emotional cheating or casual dinners with friends. This was a life she'd been rehearsing, a script she'd been writing without me. There were ticket stubs, handwritten notes, and a receipt from a jeweler. One envelope had my name scribbled on it, but I didn't open it. I couldn't, because suddenly I understood. This box wasn't hidden to be forgotten. It was hidden to be revealed someday. She'd been preparing her exit carefully, methodically, while I'd been too busy fixing leaky faucets and patching up our crumbling marriage to notice she was building a second life elsewhere. I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I carried the box inside, placed it on the kitchen table, and walked back out without saying a word. Let her see what I'd discovered. Let her feel the panic of being exposed, the weight of secrets no longer shielded by silence. I drove aimlessly for hours, eventually parking outside an old diner we used to visit during happier times. Back then, she smiled at me like I mattered, as though I were the center of her world, not just a prop in someone else's story. When I returned home that night, the house was eerily quiet. For a moment, I thought she might have left already, taking her lies with her. Part of me hoped she had. But no, she was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the unopened box like it was a bomb about to detonate. She didn't look up when I came in. Her voice broke the silence first. "So, you found it?" I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, waving. "I wasn't going to show you until I was sure," she said softly. "Sure of what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "That I wanted to leave," she whispered. The words landed like a punch to the gut, as if I were nothing more than an obstacle standing between her and the life she truly wanted. "You built a secret life while I folded your laundry and fixed the garage door," I said, my voice tight. She hesitated before opening the box again, her hands trembling slightly. "It wasn't supposed to be a secret," she murmured. "I was just waiting for the right moment." I almost laughed at that. Almost. There are moments when the facade crumbles and everything you thought was solid dissolves into dust. That's what happened to me. She did something that left me breathless, not with anger, but with a kind of shock that freezes you in place. Her composure shattered, and she began to cry. Not delicate, controlled tears, but raw, gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to claw their way out of her chest. It wasn't guilt over being caught. It felt deeper than that, as if something inside her had finally broken. "I don't know who I am anymore," she choked out between gasps for air. "When I look at you, I feel guilty. When I look at him, I feel like a fraud. I don't even know which version of me is real." I wanted to hate her. Every fiber of my being screamed to push her away, to detach completely. But instead, I stood there, rooted to the spot, immobilized by an old, stubborn part of myself, the part that always needed to mend, to rescue, to fix. Yet this time, I didn't move toward her. I didn't offer comfort or solutions. Instead, I whispered, "Maybe you're neither," and walked away. That night, sleep eluded me, but it wasn't the restless, anxiety-driven insomnia I'd grown accustomed to. This was different. A hollow stillness, like standing amidst the charred remains of a house fire, breathing in the acrid scent of ash while realizing you've survived. She cried herself to sleep in the other room, the door firmly shut, leaving the box we'd argued about sitting open on the table. I didn't go in. I didn't check on her or ask if she was okay. For once, I let her sit alone in the wreckage she'd created. By morning, clarity had settled over me, quiet but unshakable. Revenge wasn't what I sought. Neither was some explosive confrontation or public spectacle. What I wanted was peace, clarity without chaos. So I wrote a letter, not to her, but to myself. It wasn't eloquent or profound, just a stark list of truths I'd buried under layers of denial for years. How I'd diminished myself to protect her ego. How I'd ignored warning signs because I feared being labeled jealous or insecure. How I'd clung so tightly to the idea of us that I failed to notice she'd emotionally checked out long before. Line by line, I laid it bare, not for closure, but for understanding. Then I packed a bag. Nothing excessive, just enough to last a few nights. There were no slammed doors, no dramatic exits. I left the letter on my pillow and stepped outside. The air felt foreign, lighter somehow, as though I'd been carrying a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged until it was gone. I stayed at a motel on the outskirts of town, its stale smell of worn carpet and microwave popcorn oddly comforting. For the first time in ages, my phone remained silent, not because no one cared, but because I wasn't waiting for her validation to make me whole. A week later, I filed for divorce. This time, there were no hysterics, no desperate pleas. She simply nodded, as if she'd known this moment was inevitable and powerless to prevent it. Maybe she felt remorse. Maybe she didn't. Either way, it stopped being my responsibility to carry that burden. Am I healed? No. Whole? Far from it. But I'm no longer living in her shadow. Signing the papers felt symbolic, like closing a chapter I'd been too afraid to end. Folding the letter I'd written to myself, I finally looked in the mirror without flinching. Peace, I realized, doesn't come wrapped in answers. It comes when you stop needing them. If you've ever encountered a similar dilemma, we would be grateful to learn how you managed the situation. Your insights could provide valuable guidance for others navigating comparable challenges. Sharing your experience might help someone else find clarity or courage when facing their own pivotal moments. Every story matters, and your perspective could make all the difference in shaping someone's path forward.